For decades, the Motor Racing Network has told you the story on the racetrack.
Cale's in the grass. Cale loses it. He tries to pull it back. Downey side by side. They make contact. Both head toward the wall.
But more often than not, that's only half the story. Now, we're pulling back the curtain on all those tall tales both in and out of the garage.
The whole situation between Cale and Donnie was simply, if I can't win it, I'm going to make sure you don't.
Stories the newer fans have never heard, and the older ones just can't get enough of.
When that right cross hit that jaw, it's over.
We're sending you into another MRN Tailspin.
Trouble on turn 5.
Now, here's your host, Alex Hayden.
Hi, everybody, and welcome again to another edition of Tailspin here on MRN.com. I'm Alex Hayden alongside the legendary voice Barney Hall, and of course, our esteemed panelist as well, Jim Chopper Phillips, longtime voice of Motor Racing Network on Pit Road, and of course, an over-the-wall crew member back in the days with L.D. Ottinger. On the hot seat with us today in Tailspin is a man who got his start racing go-karts in his native California. We welcome to Tailspin, Ernie Irvan. Ernie, how are you?
Well, I'm doing really good.
Good. Well, you started racing go-karts in California. How does a young man in California decide from karts that NASCAR is the way to go?
There's a lot of things that just kept happening. My dad was a racer. NASCAR, we knew about, but, that was just way out there. And Dad was racing, and when I turned 16, he put me in a stock car, and we ran on the dirt a little bit, a couple, 3, 4 races, and then we went up to Stockton Speedway and started running up there, and started winning actually, and then we met Ivan Baldwin, which he was a great car builder, and he kind of took me under his wing. Sometimes people don't really like to admit they're under their wing with Ivan Baldwin, but he was a great guy, and he taught me a lot. And he built my best car at the time, and he built it, and we ended up winning the championship in '77, and won a lot of races, and everything went really good. And then some of my mom and dad split up at the time, and it just so happened that, I stayed with Mom and tried to help her, and, I was still trying to race, and actually got with Jack McCoy, and Barney probably knows Jack McCoy, and we started running some Winston West races with him, and ran good, but he was not really capable or really interested in putting a lot of money into it, and so then I ended up going to work at Ivan's and building race cars, and just trying to take a race at a time, and so then I finally moved to North Carolina because my dad had moved back here, and he kept saying, if you want to do anything in racing, you have to be on the East Coast. And so I loaded up everything I had, which wasn't much. I had a little Dodge pickup truck, and I built a trailer to pull behind it, and it ended up that I really only had $800. So if you have $800, and on the way you stop in Vegas.
Of course.
Yeah. So I stopped in Vegas and was just about out of money, and made a couple last bets and ended up with $1,000. So I figured the next thing I need to do is leave. And so because I didn't try to turn the 1,000 into 2,000, so it was me and my uncle driving back, and we went from Vegas nonstop to Concord, and ended up that started doing some odds and end jobs, and Dad had a race car I started running a little bit, and here on the dirt, and ended up that me and Mark Reno, I've known Mark for a long time, and we used to build a lot of Mark's cars, and so me and Mark kind of got together, and we started building our own cars again, and racing at Concord Speedway, and it was on the dirt, and we kept doing that for a while. And
is that when you ran the six-cylinder cars, six-cylinder dirt cars?
I ran some six-cylinders. Most of the time I ran the V8 stuff with Mark, and we won a lot of races at Concord, and so it brought a lot of attention because, a lot of people know what's going on at Concord Speedway. And then when they paved it, it was like, it was really easy for us for a while because that's all we'd ever done. And, Mark is a really inventive and very talented guy. And so we ended up starting to win a lot of races when they paved it and won some dirt races. And, they used to have the Big Ten series at Concord.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it got very popular. And I won a couple of the Big Ten races. And, me and Mark, kept going, trying to do things. And so Mark come up one day, and he's always like real quiet. And he's whistling, but real quiet. You can almost not hear him. And next thing I know, he's starting to build this car. But he had got the car, I think, from John Borneman, out on the West Coast, and it had burnt. And so he had got it for free. So he said, "What we're going to do is we're going to put this car together, and we're going to try to run, probably Richmond." And I'm like, "Mark, do you see that car?" He goes, "Not a problem. We can make it good." And so we started, working on it. Mark really worked on it all the time because he was the one that was very talented to do that. I was kind of the one that could grind and weld every once in a while. And
he worked for Robert Yates too, right?
He ended up working for Robert when I won my last race.
That's what I thought.
And so we ended up building this car, and so we were doing a lot of stuff for Earnhardt, building different things for him to go hunting on and things. and so Ken Schrader comes by.
Neil Bonnet said that was important.
Yeah, oh yeah. And then Kenny Schrader and we had done some stuff for Schrader too. And so Schrader comes by and he says, "Man, what are you guys going to do with this car?" I said, "Well, we're going to try to go to Richmond." And he said, "Well, who's going to sponsor it?" I said, "Well, we don't really have a sponsor. We're just trying to put this thing all together." And, like Mark said, he said, "We're going to go anyway, so, we're needing help, but we're going to try to do it." And he said, "I got a credit card, so we're going to be able to get quite a ways." And it ended up that Schrader said, "Well, Earnhardt's opening the Chevrolet dealership. Why don't I try to get him to sponsor you guys?" And I'm like, "Really?"
Get Dale Earnhardt to sponsor your one-off deal.
Yeah, well, and so Schrader says, "Well, I'm riding with him down to Darlington, and by the time I get back, I'll have the deal put together." So they go down there, they race. I'm not sure where they finished and stuff. Schrader comes back to the shop, and he said, "Okay, got your deal put together." And I said, "Okay, well, so what are we doing?" He said, "Well, Dale is opening a Chevrolet dealership, Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet." And he said that, he'll let you put his name on the side of the car, and what we'll do is we'll still have it painted up like your short track cars because we don't want to repaint it because it costs more money. And we kind of looked at that and we said, "Okay, well, first thing I said, okay, well, what's he going to give us? How much money is he going to give us?" And Schrader said, "Earnhardt said that you can put my name on the side of your car. I'm not giving you no money, but I'm giving you credibility." And we're like, I told Mark, I said, "That doesn't pay for tires." Mark said, "We're going anyway. So, that's what we're going to do." And sure enough, that was the smartest thing. That jump-started my career, with, Schrader and Dale doing that. Obviously it was Dale's name that brought so much notoriety to me. And for him to put his name on the side of our car, it's just, that's the only thing that really got me started. And if I'd have went to Richmond and won the race, that would have got me some notoriety. But there was no chance we were going to do that. We went to Richmond and ended up blowing a motor, but qualified for the race and ran, didn't have no trouble, and ended up blowing a motor. And so DK Ulrich saw that, and he said, "Hey, I mean, I've got some other races. Would you like to drive my car in some?
That crazy number 2. That was
Yeah.
the wildest looking number 2 I've ever seen on the side of a car.
Yeah. So we ran a couple races for DK, and he says, you know, all I want to do is I want to make sure we make the race and try to run as many laps as we can. And so these days probably people wouldn't tell me that because they knew that I wasn't going to do that. I might hit something on the way. So we made Martinsville, which was one of the races he wanted to make, and I think we made North Wilkesboro, and then there was Charlotte time, and so Mark wanted to run his car at Charlotte, and that was the plan anyway, and so we went to Charlotte, but Dale came in and he said, "You're not running the car like this. You're not running it black and white." He said, "You're going to have to paint it silver, black stripe on the bottom, and it's going to have Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet and my signature." And we're like, okay, well, how are we going to do that? Because that's cost money.
Yeah, credibility doesn't pay for paint either. Yeah.
He said, if I remember right, he said, "I'll pay for that." And he said, well, okay, well, are you going to get us some tires or something? No. Same thing. You're going to have credibility when you're driving to Charlotte. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good deal that when we did it at Martinsville, and it all turned out all right. So, but at Richmond, and so then we went to Charlotte, and ran. We qualified, and I was, everybody was like, well, who's this guy again? He's got Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet on the side of his car again. So, maybe he must be pretty good. And so we ended up finishing 8th, if I remember right, at Charlotte, and run all the laps and did well. And, I mean, I know that Dale come up before the race, and he told me, he said, "Let me explain something to you. I want to see you every lap of the race. I want to make sure, and you need to make sure you finish this race." And Dale grabbed me by the shoulders and kind of like squeeze hard, and that was Dale, and was trying to convince me to make sure that I not got any wrecks. So everything did, and I ended up 8th and had no idea how all that happened. I mean, I've never even watched that race back on TV, but I mean, it was what set me off. And then I ran DK's car at Riverside with the number 6 number on it, and so we ended up making the race there and running pretty decent. So then after that, then it ended up that DK had a sponsor with Kroger, and so we ran for Rookie of the Year. We got beat by Ken Bouchard, and ran good.
Closest rookie finish, points battle finish too in history, between you and Kenny Bouchard.
I didn't remember that, but yeah. That's
3 points, I believe, is what if I remember correctly.
You weren't even that old.
No,
No,
I'm a student of the sport, though.
That's right.
Okay.
I taught him a lot.
So we ended up that all went good, and ended up that I think we ran one more year with DK, and after that it ended up that DK didn't have no more money and no more deals.
He didn't have any more money to paint those twos on there like he did. I've never seen such a 2 in my life. But anyway, that got you a lot of, but because you ran good, you ran competitive.
I remember the one race we ran at Bristol, and we actually led the race. And you don't do that with DK's car because, I mean, it's like,
that's right.
It's not up to date. But that was kind of when the Hoosier deal was all, getting intermingled with all the racing. And, we ran good with the Hoosiers. And
a lot of people got hurt.
Yeah, ended up that, I led the race, and, that brought me a lot more notoriety. But then DK didn't have a sponsor, and so I was kind of like sitting and saying, okay, what am I do now? And Junie Dunleavy, which was the greatest person besides Barney Hall. I mean, it's like, they're both, they're on the same mold.
That's right.
And so Junie calls me and tells me, he says, hey, I mean, I've got a new sponsor, and I mean, I'd like you to drive my car. And the sponsor was True Cure. It's kind of like it was some sort of Loctite or something. So we ended up running 3 races, and then Junie come to me and said, well, I don't have any more money. The guy's never paid me, and I'm kind of like, I can't do no more. And he said, you're welcome to do whatever you can. I mean, I've got a ride for you whenever we have enough money to do it. And so ended up, that was about the same time that the 4-car was looking for somebody to do.
The 4-car being Morgan McClure Motorsports.
Yeah, Morgan McClure Motorsports and Tony Glover.
Who had Phil Parsons driving
had Phil
at the
Parsons
time.
driving, yeah. And so Tony called me and he said, hey, and I had known Tony through DK and all that, and so Tony called me and he said, hey, would you be interested in driving the 4-car? And I said, well, I mean, that's a stupid question. And that was easy to understand. And he said, well, we're going to go test at Atlanta, and if everything goes right, you'll probably be able to drive this 4-car.
And the 4-car at that time did have the Kodak sponsorship.
Kodak
Yes, it
sponsorship.
did.
I mean, it was like, that was a dream come true. I mean, it's, somebody that had started where I'm was at, and then got to where I am at, at that time, and being able to drive, one of the legendary cars, and it was, it was kind of amazing. And so we went down and tested at Atlanta, and things went really good. And Tony told me, he says, okay, I want you to go out and practice. And it had been raining, and so the track was seeping some. So Tony said, he said, just go out. He says, not a problem. You're going to get this ride, and you just go out. I mean, we got to test a little bit anyway, just because I want to see you drive this car. Well, kind of like the person that I normally was, and out in the race car, I mean, the only thing I knew is go fast, and so Tony said, now be careful. Well, didn't really matter, and so I went out there and I run it really hard, and I mean, you could feel the seeping of the water, but I figured if you went fast enough over it, then you're not on it very long. So
I love the logic.
Oh, yeah, that sounded like Ernie Irvan.
Yeah.
Me.
So it ended up that we ran really good. I mean, Tony's like, we ran. Tony said it's like we run as good or close to the track record as what he says. It may be just a story, but I mean, everything went really good. And so, then obviously Larry and Tony sat me down and wanted to know if I would be interested in driving the Kodak car, and just being able to do that was pretty awesome. We actually won our race at Bristol, which is where
finest thing you could do for those boys is to win your
At
first
Bristol.
race at Bristol.
Yep, it was, and I mean that was their home track, and there was a little bit of partying after the race.
There was.
Yeah, you weren't involved in it.
No,
yet,
I
were you?
wasn't, but I heard about it.
Yeah, so I mean, but I mean that was the awesome part, and being able to win that race, and then we go to Daytona and win the 500, and Tony told me, he says,
now tell us about winning the Daytona 500 in 1991. You make them about 5 wide, 4 wide. You did everything you could to win that race, and you did.
Well, we had a restart towards the end of the race,
Right.
if I recall, and I mean, I know Earnhardt. I think Earnhardt was leading, and I was running second or third, or I think second. And so on the restart, I mean, the first thing I thought was, what would Dale do? And so I got to do something different than he's going to do, because then I'm just going to be following. And I mean, I just recall a lot of the stuff I remember Dale doing as far as in the draft and things. And I don't know if he told me or somebody else had told me, sometimes you lag back some, not so much, but you lag back some, and so they don't know that you're really lagging back. They think you're just not right kept up. And I did, and it was like I did it perfect because we went a whole lap, and I started sucking up on him. That's kind of a bad word. Catching him, and it ended up that going down the front straightaway, going into turn 1, I drafted and got all the way up beside him, and then I got by him, and then Davey Allison got beside Dale, and that was what won me the race because him and Davey were fighting for a second,
Right.
and it ended up that I think Davey got sideways and got into Dale, and it ended up that they crashed, and ended up they finished under caution. So that was just an unbelievable day, and and then they invited me to the White House, and some kid from California that basically only had $800 to his name doesn't go to the White House, and so it was kind of an odd deal because I really didn't know about some of this highfalutin, eating and
which
things.
fork to use and things like that.
Right. No, I'm. So.
Did you care which fork if you
No,
were
I
in the
didn't
White House?
care. Yeah. So I was sitting. They called me and wanted to know if I would come to a steak dinner, and I thought, well, yeah, that'd be good. So then I find out that it's not a steak. It's a state dinner. So then I had to find out what they're eating. And so it just so happened that I sit at a table with Terry Garr.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
the actress.
well.
Yeah.
Well, that's not bad.
No.
not bad at all.
And
No.
to use your word, that doesn't suck.
No. Oh, careful. So I was sitting at a table with her, and first thing she did was say, "Hey, did you go through a metal detector on the way in?" I said, "Yeah, I think everybody does." She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "There'd be nothing better than have some of this really, really nice silverware." And she goes, "But the problem is how would you get out with it?" She goes, "Do you go through a metal detector on the way out?" I said, "How would I know? I've never been on the way out." And I said, "You've probably been here at the White House before." She goes, "I haven't either." She goes, "Well, what we'll do is, do all the politics stuff, and when we get ready to leave, you leave first and find out if they go through a metal detector." And she goes, "If you'll put one fork in your pocket, and then it'll be an accident, And I said, "Oh, okay, that's all right." I didn't know. I was at a steak dinner. Oh, that's a state dinner, yeah. So we ended up. I walked out. And they no metal detector.
Oh, wow.
She walks out with a whole silverware set. But that was the only time I got to see her, and but it was just was entertaining.
Did you see her going out in the car with the Secret Service people or what?
No, I was with her in the car. Yeah.
Nice.
No.
Thanks so much to Ernie Irvan for being our guest here on Tailspin. Of course, Jim Chopper Phillips and the legendary Barney Hall here. I'm Alex Hayden. Thanks so much, everybody, for this another edition of Tailspin.